Hi, thanks for joining me. Today we're going to take a look at installing the SNMPRI, or SNMP Research International, Distributed SNMP Security Pack, DSSP. This product is used as the v3 proxy when eHealth does v3 discoveries, because eHealth does not natively support SNMPv3. So let's begin. The first thing we'll need is an eHealth machine. Today we're actually looking at a Linux machine. So we're going to install on Linux. And I am logged in as root, and I have the software already handy in the WinShare directory. And so we're going to do a long listing, and we'll see that the ISO file for 18.1, which is the current GA version of SNMPRI DSSP, is available right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the CD, and that'll allow me to access all the files on it without having to uncompress it. And we mounted it on the WAC-MNT directory, so I'll go there and take a look at what's in there. And we see that all the files that are available on the ISO file, which is actually a DVD image, are now available to me. So we're going to CD into the correct operating system directory. In this case, we're doing Linux. And again, we'll do a long listing to see what's in there. And there's really only one file, setup.bin. The actual install of the product is really very simple. We simply call the setup, and it will install. Now, this machine already has eHealth on it, so it's going to see that during the install, and it's going to automatically choose that as the default. So this is talking about Install Anywhere, which is the non-platform specific media that installs the product. And then this is the license agreement. You can read through it and then agree to it. I don't wish to particularly read it right now. So as you can see, it's already chosen the eHealth product because it sees it as available. So that's the default, and we're going to just hit enter to accept the default. And the install will choose user local SNMPRI as the default, and that's fine with me. Then it gives you a summary of what you just chose, and I'll accept that. And we'll go ahead and install. As I said, the install itself is very simple, and then there'll be a few steps after the install is done where we'll have to configure it to run with the parameters that we require. Out of the box, it doesn't really have enough parameters set up to handle the load that SNMPv3 polling from eHealth can put on it, so we're going to edit the startup script to start with special parameters. And as we can see, back to the command line, so this install is already done. Really isn't much to it at all. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go and edit in RC3D, which is for run level 3, the startup scripts, the brass server file. So what we're going to do is we're going to CD there. And then we'll do a long listing. And we'll pipe that to grep, because there's a lot of files in here. And we'll look for the brass file. And we see that we have a file in here called S565 brass server, and it's actually a soft link to the local startup scripts that are in the install media itself. After the product is installed, it creates a startup scripts directory, and it's calling that file. But by editing the soft link, we're actually editing the hard file, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead and VI, and it's capital S, 565, capital V, and then it'll self-populate. So we're going to edit this file. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put in some information that tells it to auto-start and at what levels to run, and that's what this is. And even though this is commented, it actually will be read on startup. And we're going to put that right underneath the shebang. So we'll do O for insert, and then we'll right mouse click. And then I like another line just for neatness, and we see that it looks pretty good. So we're going to do escape. And then the next thing we're going to do is, as I said, we want to change the default parameters. So anywhere where there's a run line, or in other words, anywhere in this script where it calls /brassd, we're going to change the default parameters to include all of these values. And one thing I'd like to call out is there's a new parameter here, which is this here. And By default, the 18.1 version actually listens for traps, and as a result, it locks up port 162, and that can conflict with our trap exploder. So we're going to add this switch into the parameters so that at each line that it calls, it's going to make sure that it calls that new parameter, as well as the other defaults. And you'll notice really what we're doing here is we're just increasing some of the buffers so that it can handle the load of v3 polling for eHealth, because eHealth does call a lot of information and it can overload the server. So we'll take that and put it in buffer. Now, the way that we're going to search this file rather than scroll line by line is in VI. If you hit / and then type a string, it will search for that string. So I'll hit enter, and it finds the first entry. And we see that that's not a run line, but rather it's part of a path. And to find the next entry, you just type the letter N. And again, that's not a run line. That's an echo statement. That's an echo. That's an if loop. Now that's a run line. See how it starts with / and it's telling it basically calling the product? So we're going to delete that line. And then we're going to hit I for insert. And we're going to hit our right mouse button, which is going to place what we have in buffer in there. We'll hit escape to get out of insert. We'll hit home to get back to where I'm working. And for next, we just edited that. This is an echo line. This is a process. Well, it's actually part of an if loop. This is a run line because it's got the /, so we're going to remove that line. We're going to hit I for insert, right mouse click for what's in buffer, escape, hit home to get me back to where I was. And I believe there are only really 3 entries in here for us to edit, but again, we just edited that. And that's an echo statement. And that's an if loop. That's a run line. So let's go to the beginning of that line, and we'll X out all the values. We'll hit I for insert. All right, mouse click again, escape, home, and for next, we just edited that. And that's an echo, that's an if, that's a, who knows, but it's part of an if loop. It's an echo, that's part of an if loop. And as I said, there were really only 3 values for us to change, and I believe we have. So now we can see in red, we've hit the bottom of the file. There's no more entries for brass. So we know that we've edited this file, and on each of the 3 run lines, we've gone ahead and changed the startup parameters to the parameters we prefer. So we're going to hit escape, WQ bang, which is right quit with force, and we'll hit enter, and the file is now edited. So now that we've done that, the next thing for us to do is to create a symbolic link so that there is now an entry to the rc3.d startup script in initd. Otherwise, when we try to add it as a daemon with check config, it won't know where that value is. So we're going to run this command. And as you can see, that's basically putting a soft link, and it's creating a link from the etc.rc3.d file to etc initd, and calling the daemon or service or brassd. So we'll put that in a buffer, and we'll run that at the command line. And now if we cd to etc initd, and we do a long listing, and we search that for brass, we'll see that indeed we have a soft link, so that when I now try to add this as a service or daemon in Linux, it was able to successfully take that. And to verify that, we see that brassd is listed as a daemon, and it's going to start on run levels 3, 4, and 5. And so at this point, we're pretty much done configuring brassd, but there are still a few other small things we'd like to do. So we want to set a proxy variable. The way this works is when eHealth is asked to do a discovery, the first thing it does is it checks the database under the SNMPv3 key info to see if there's an entry for the address it's being asked to discover. And if it is, it will use that information, and that information will override what's in the discover policy, such as the IP address, and the community strings. Instead of using the default community string, whatever's in your Discover GUI, it will actually use the values that are in that table for v3, and it will pass them to the DSSP process, which will then act as a proxy between eHealth and the v3 target that we're discovering. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to edit one of the startup scripts for eHealth, and that's the nethealthrc.sh.user. Now, ordinarily, you would source this file when you started up or logged in as your user to get your environment variables read, but this .user file is loaded before anybody logs in. It's loaded on boot up. So we're going to edit that file. And WAC eHealth with a capital H is my NH home. If your NH home is different, of course, you would use a different path. So now I'm in this file, and you can see by default there actually are no values in it. So I'll hit O for a new line, and then I'll go and grab my entry. And when I make an entry in any file, I always like to put white comments in it, which is these comments behind the pound signs, just so you know what that value is and where it came from. So we'll insert this using our right mouse click, and we see that so I've got a line saying this is to source the BRASD proxy variable. Then I've got the actual export command and then the end of the BRASD section. And that way, anybody who reads this file will know where that value came from. So I'm done editing this. Escape, :WQ bang. And now that file is also edited. So at this point, we've installed our product. We've edited the startup script to reflect the values that are a concern to us. We've edited the nethealthrc.sh.user file to ensure that the proxy variable is started and loaded in the OS before eHealth comes up, and that way eHealth will see it and use it. Now, to be polite, we're going to unmount the ISO, and we put that in MNT. And we do that because the next person to come along, they need to mount something, and we don't want to have that directory used up for something that we're now done with. So you mount just the command. And now if we CD to MNT and do a long listing, we'll see the directory is now empty. So it's changed and it's no longer what it was. So that's good. So at this point, we can go ahead and let me just double check my instructions, and I believe we're all set. So at this point, we can reboot. And this really doesn't take very long. It's a decent machine. And while it's down, when it comes back up, it'll load the variable. It'll load all of our values for startup, and we'll see that the BRASD daemon is now running. So we'll give this a moment. I'm actually going to pause the recording for a second. And welcome back. So the machine has come back up, and we're going to check and verify that our process is indeed running. And we see that indeed the BRASD daemon is running and it's using port 161. So we have successfully installed. We have also, let's double check. We'll SU to the NH user. In my case, that's eHealth. Yours may or may not be the same. And when you SU hyphen, what it does is it sources the environment. So now if we check the environment for that user, and we will see that the proxy address that we added to that user file is also sourced. And so we have installed BRASD. We have configured it to use the necessary parameters so it can support the v3 polling from eHealth. We have set the proxies so that eHealth knows where to send that information as well as it knows where to reply to eHealth. And we have rebooted, and we've seen that everything is running. So for the record, the commands that we used in this video are listed here. We used cd, mount, long listing, ls-l. We used pipe to push from one argument to another. We used grep to search. We used vi to edit a file, and the commands we used within vi were / for search, N for next, and I for insert. We created a soft link with ln-s. We added a daemon and configured that daemon with check config. We used PS-EF to check if processes were running, and we used umount to unmount the CD after we were done with it. And here is the exact syntax for the arguments to every command that we ran. Mount, CD, ls, vi, the entries that we put into the file, the mention of the new parameter that's required with 18.1 and up, the soft link we created for initd, how to add the service and check that it's running. This is 6.5 specific. You can still use these commands in Red Hat 7X, but initd is no longer used as the primary service daemon. It uses systemd. So when you run these commands, you'll get slightly different values back, but it will still accept them. We used vi on the nethealthrc.sh.user, and we added this entry, and then we unmounted our DVD. That's pretty much the whole thing. Thank you very much for joining me.